on SoTL. This podcast aims to build a culture of scholarship of teaching and learning in higher education, with a specific focus on transitional pedagogy, innovation, and block mode. Scholarship of teaching and learning is more colloquially known as SoTL. In contemporary university environments, good teaching alone is not enough. More and more often, academics are being asked to provide evidence of teaching and learning outcomes. But what does this look like in reality? Sure, it can involve formalised original research, but on the ground level, it involves making transparent how we make learning possible. This involves reflection, inquiry, evaluation, and communication. And that is what we are here to achieve today. My guests today are the outdoor education staff in the first year college, here to talk about how curriculum and learning can extend beyond the boundaries of the traditional classroom. Welcome, Craig, Steve, and Aaron. Thank you for coming along.
Thanks for having us, Kate.
This is always a challenge for academics, but can you start off by briefly introducing yourselves and telling me a little bit about what your roles are? Craig, do you want to lead?
Sure. Look, it's always interesting because folks in the outdoors generally come from so many different directions, but we all end up here for a variety of reasons, whether we're social misfits or not. But look, it's kind of a combination of academia, but it's just as much about outdoor experiences and previous employments. So I started off early on as just loving the outdoors and being dragged out there by my folks. So that's probably where it really began. My education began there. And I've told folks that I could have easily liked the outdoors or hated it due to my dad's approach to the outdoors. He's a little bit gung-ho. But from there, I ended up with Outward Bound for a little bit. And then as a mountain guide in Colorado and as a winter backcountry guide. And then that took me to a number of different places with ski instructing and the like. Went to uni, did science, and then have found my way into education since I've come to Australia nearly 30 years ago. And that's in the outdoors. I've headed up an outdoor program at a secondary school, at Lauriston Girls School, and then have worked within industry, within skiing and just some outdoor providerships, worked with youth at risk, worked in the vet sector, running a couple of different diploma programs with at La Trobe Uni and at GoTAFE, and then ultimately have ended up here at VU, which I'm really excited about.
Wow, well, you put my history to shame. That is quite a story. It sounds like you've experienced so much. That's a tough act to follow. But Steve, do you want to introduce yourself and a little bit of your background?
Yeah, so I started off many eons ago, I guess myself as well. Just loved the outdoors as a young fella growing up. I also loved sport, and I had this parallel world of competitive sport and the recreational side of things, and I tried to keep them together all the way through my journey. Began some teacher training at BCAE, Ballarat College of Advanced Education, back in the day, and they had an outdoors program, and also I really bought into that. Watched Chariots of Fire one time and looked at the link that these sporting people in particular had with Eric Little had with the outdoors. And having also been a bit interested in John Landy's follow-up, he also kept engaged with the outdoors even while he was doing his 4-minute miles. So that it really enthralled me. So I've kept going. Really love going into the field, working with kids, trying to hook them in. And I think that's been the biggest thing is I've loved this space. And my biggest thrill comes from being able to get students to also love this space and to sell that to them so that it enriches them to be able to want to come back and to keep at it. And so, worked at a secondary school for 26 odd years, then worked for myself and my own company for about 8 years, freelancing in the outdoor sector, did some sessional work at a TAFE, and then here I am now at Vic Uni the start of 2020. Got into one field trip and then learned a little bit about online teaching.
Yeah, I know. It probably wasn't the dream experience that you were imagining, but I can definitely confirm that you're still managing to inspire your students, because they tell me stories about field trips they've been on when they're in my class, where I make them sit in a boring classroom and talk about their feelings. And I can tell you that most of their feelings about field trips are extremely positive. So I think you are achieving your goals. Last but certainly not least, Aaron, do you want to say a few words about yourself?
My background is I grew up in Queensland, and my grandfather was heavily involved in outdoor ed. He set up the first outdoor education school in Queensland, and was the foundation principal there.
Wow.
So that exposed, I guess, the rest of my family to outdoor ed, and through that process, he was introduced to orienteering. So the family, I think I was 4 days old the first time I went orienteering with my mum.
Wow.
So I grew up orienteering and road gaining, bushwalking, and just generally exploring the outdoors when I was a kid. And I guess I find my peace when I'm out in the forest. When I left school, I moved to Sydney to study an arts course, and I saw a advertisement on a billboard at uni saying come work in ski fields in the States. So I applied, and I was offered a ski instructor job. So I ended up moving to West Virginia, having never seen snow before.
Wow.
So I was trained up to become a ski instructor, and did some training and certificates there, and started working off as just, working with the little kids on the bunny hill. And that led to me pursuing ski instructing full time for about 18 months across Australia and back to the States. Unfortunately, this is around the time of the global financial crisis, so work dried up when I was living in Utah. So that sent me back to university. I do recall one time sitting on a chairlift when I was working in Perisher, having a chat to some school teachers about their program, and they were saying that they're PE teachers, but they get paid to go out and do world challenge and ski trips. So that was fairly appealing for me to pick up a secondary teaching qualification. I moved back to Queensland. Unfortunately, there wasn't a specific outdoor course at the time, so I did the PE degree at the University of Queensland, and did as much as I could in the outdoor education, outdoor learning space. Including going on a camp, which took me back to the outdoor ed campus that my grandfather had set up.
Oh, no way.
Walking in there, I've got the principal coming over and introducing himself and saying, "Oh, you're Rob's grandson." I was like, "How'd you know that?" I was like, "Oh, he told me you were coming." And that's where it all kind of clicked. It was that program that I was like, the PE space is probably not where I'm meant to be working. It's the outdoor space that I'm meant to be in. I finished that degree. I actually ended up moving to Stockholm and teaching in an international school for 2 years, where I was teaching various subjects, including math, science, and PE. And it was when I was running the PE program that I set up some outdoor education, outdoor learning activities within the program, and was also running an extracurricular kind of adventure club in that as well. So after returning to Australia, I decided that I wanted to pursue kind of outdoors full time, so I ended up upskilling, doing all my guiding certifications, and that led to me then moving to the outdoor education group, working there for a few years as a team mentor, building up into doing some work-class training with them, which then led me down a similar pathway to my colleagues into working with the TAFEs. So I did some work with Wodonga before moving back to Queensland to work for a couple of private RTOs running SoTL I programs before the job at BU came up, and I thought that looks like an incredible opportunity. So I applied, and here I am.
Well, that all sounds like an incredible story. So try and ground me a little bit now, guys. Pitch to me that the outdoor education course and the outdoor leadership courses are actually quite complex in nature. And I'm just wondering if you guys were able to share some of your experiences in designing units that involve both teaching in the traditional classroom and then field delivery, and how you find that balance between them.
Look, it's an interesting thing, Kate, and these guys will have plenty to offer. So I'll just break the ice. It's nice to have a bit of time in both spaces. I mean, we need to make sure that our students are prepared to go out. This is probably our biggest challenge, is to make sure that our students can head out there and really look after themselves. I know Busey and I were talking earlier, and I know we've brought this up with the three of us in our conversations before, but the students have to be meeting their basic needs before they can move into the space of any kind of learning. So we spend a little bit of time trying to tick off Maslow's first order needs there.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing, because the curriculum, of course, is really important to all the things taught in first year college and at the university. But we're really in an unusual place, and maybe not so much, I don't know, where really we have to put the people before the content. And in doing that, then we can kind of look at what the capacity is to learn within that environment. And then we can look at how our curriculum follows suit to that. But look, one of the things that we've discovered is a lot of the folks that come to us or are coming to us at VU are really, you'd expect students to sign on for an outdoor program to have all this experience.
Yeah.
And they're really coming to us to discover the outdoors.
Wow.
And it's a great place, and as Peasy said, it's really fun to bring people to that level of wonder. But at the same time, we're really trying to help them become comfortable in nature, as well as learn the content. We have discovered that we have a number of students that are experiencing the outdoors for the first time, usually 10 days in a row, something like that. So there's some challenges.
Yeah.
But most of the students seem to love it, and that's probably due to the good work of my colleagues, Awesome.
Amazing. Does anyone want to add something to that?
I'll mention that again these course design and what we're trying to put together. I guess it rings true to the three of us when you actually see or hear of the students then going out by themselves to want to undertake these trips, to excite them enough and provide them with confidence enough to go out and it may be a simple trip, but to get them the communication sometimes that come back indirectly via a text or a phone message to say, we're going to go to this place, and hey, look at the picture of us in this space, and it's because of something that we as a team have created a space that they now feel safe to extend themselves a bit further. So that's been, I find that a real plus with these tertiary students. You wouldn't get it so much in a secondary setting, but the tertiary setting, you do get this rapport that the three of us work to build with the students, but to see them come back with what they're able to do is it's a feel-good feeling. I'm sure the three of us really enjoy when we see them. We go, yay, they got there.
No, that sounds amazing. And one thing I definitely would like to commend you all on is your ability to foster culture and that sense of belonging within your cohorts. And I see that when I teach them in interpersonal skills in my classroom, they really are a close-knit, bonded group that support each other and help one another out. And I think that is really nice to see. And I think that probably attributes a lot to the work you guys do on those 10-day long trips. And I guess that bonds you in a way that sitting in a classroom drinking coffee probably doesn't bond you as much. I really liked what you said before, Craig, about this notion of people before content. I think you're right in that in a lot of fields we do focus so much on that discipline knowledge, and then the development of people and the protection of people comes as almost an assumed practice or complementary in that. I'm just wondering, how do you maintain that level of student engagement during these multiple day trips where I'm sure moods and engagement fluctuates over time?
Yeah, look, I think that the student preparedness is really important because then, as we said, they can meet Maslow's first order needs. But it's it's the nice thing of going to places of wonder, places of significance, impart a certain amount of wonder, and in some sense, we lay up the curriculum, and we try not to overcrowd that curriculum so the students can actually form that connection with the space and the content. But as you've already noted, they have the extra dimension of where they have to actually learn to coexist with each other. And so there's a certain amount of time that's required to build that culture. And it's not necessarily super formalized, but it's about creating that ease and also helping the students understand the priorities that they need to meet out there. So whether they have to be directed to when to eat and when to put their clothes on, sometimes we do that too. We don't wipe their noses for them. But, part of it is helping them stay comfortable, giving them or empowering them with some skills to manage themselves. Also creating a really safe environment to learn. So it is okay to fail at something. It doesn't matter if your tent falls down one night. Let's learn from it. It doesn't matter if you've burnt your food to the bottom of your pot. Tomorrow we'll try to do better. And that's one of the nice things about these extended trips is that the students have the opportunity to try and fail and then improve. It also gives other students an opportunity to peer teach, to support, and to practice, giving that feedback or even receiving it. So that in just the content alone asks a little bit more of our students in terms of how they relate to each other and what they share. I'm sure these guys would have more to add on this as well.
Yeah, Steve, I could see you were nodding in agreement very strongly with Craig.
Yeah, creating that space for the students where they can fail, but have that supporting network around them that can quickly pick them up, and the interconnections that take place, the interpersonal skills that grow out there in the field, the friendships, and I guess the friendships that happen, whether they're short-term, long-term, but that sense of belonging, really, it enables the students to be able to grow in that space and to learn, to feel comfortable to learn, and that sense of place, being immersed in that sense of place, tends to draw things out of them that can pick them up. Sometimes they're going to have their ebbs and flows, Kate, when they're out there, and it's having that time to allow natural processes of group evolution sometimes to occur, and to facilitate that to a degree, to minimise conflicts, but to deal with resolution out there. Yeah.
It sounds great. It sounds like one of the really challenging things as a teacher would be knowing when to intervene and then knowing when to let them run their course and allow, like you were saying, allow them to fail and allow them to help one another out, but then also not getting them to a point where they're miserable and they don't want to come back. And I think your ability to time that would be really complicated.
It's kind of an interesting space, Kate, because as teachers we have to be open-minded that we might actually be the students out there too.
Absolutely, and I'm sure you have learned things from them, just as they have learned.
Well, we all possess blind spots, and sometimes we learn about our blind spots while we're on trip. The key and one of the secrets is being heads up and aware, and that's not always easy. And I guess that's where the experience really comes in, where we have to be open-minded that we might be just about to be dealt a lesson in terms of how to manage a group in a difficult situation, whether that's an environmental situation or whether that's a conflict within the group, whether it's a conflict with a student and us as a staff member. We are dealing with personalities 24/7, and so it's about really staying open-minded and remaining as a student. I learned something from the students. I say it first up. I'll learn something from probably nearly everybody here at the beginning of a trip, and sometimes students will show up with some crazy little thing that their scoutmaster showed them that I haven't seen yet, and I just go, wow, that's amazing. But there are other times where students will provide a perspective that I I just hadn't been exposed to before. And I think that's what keeps me showing up.
Absolutely. And I think that would be such a wonderful thing to get to share with them rather than feeling like the master at all times. I think you probably goes a long way in helping to create the culture that you guys have within your cohorts, of respect and of belonging by making yourself an equal to them. And I think that is really respectable.
I think that one of the groups just recently, in some of the debriefs that the three of us would work with students, was we had some pretty harsh conditions dealing with certain, well, let's say leeches we had on a trip, and the students' response to that, they hated. One student responded that I really hated that, and it drove that student to the despair. But in the debrief, he said, I really enjoyed hating it because it taught me more about loving it, being out there. This is why I'm out here. I hate these things, this adversity that I'm having to deal with, but I'm really enjoying it because I'm overcoming it. And they go, okay, that was a whole new spin on things, that just, I had to really understand the difficulties so that he, in his mind, could accept the enjoyment of it.
It's a good point that you raised there, BC, because we had a student in another group on that same trip who, and it was a very wet trip, Kate. Like, it just rained every day. It was a beautiful place though too, and one of the students just expressed one day, he's going, you know what? I'm embracing the rain. I'm learning to love the wet, and the power that had on his own ability to respond was great, but that was also contagious. His attitude was contagious in the group, and it was great because then all of a sudden people embraced the wet. They didn't try to fight it. They just dealt with it, and then they did the best that they could within the circumstances. So whether it's leeches or rain, I think ultimately if students can embrace those challenges, that's where the learning really happens. Our job gets pretty easy then at that point.
I never thought that the topic of leeches was going to come up in one of these podcasts. So whoever follows this has a difficult act to follow. It's so interesting to listen to different perspectives. I think if I had a student in one of my psychology classes saying embrace the rain, we'd be throwing around phrases like denial. But you see it as such a positive thing, and it really brought the group together. And so there's that perspective aspect again. I guess my question for you guys is it really sounds like you have the ability to do so much out there. And I think this notion of giving students space to fail and then grow is something that is often lost in education, where students are so focused on the grade and the number and the mark that they don't focus on the journey and the process or even the skills that they're developing as much because it's so number oriented. And I think that probably exists more in a classroom experience where you can't distract them with things like leeches and the great world out there and all the beautiful things you're seeing. So I guess my question to you is, what curriculum design aspects do you think you guys have in the field that you believe could be adopted more broadly in a traditional classroom setting that your fellow colleagues from other disciplines could benefit from?
Yeah, I think there's a range of things that our colleagues can benefit from. I think the first is the experiential education process that we employ. And it's part of that letting the students fail mentality that we have. If you're providing a safe and supportive learning environment, the students occasionally failing is going to be a great learning opportunity for them. Some of the other things which I was considering that they could take on board is some of the event-based learning pedagogical content knowledge that we employ. So there's a process that we call full value contracts that facilitate building that safe and supportive learning environment with our groups, whereby you all agree on the rules and expectations of each other at the start of a program. And I think that setting that rules and routines is particularly important with online learning as well. This is something that I've been bringing into my classroom teaching, and it's been really beneficial for my Zoom classes to have students understand what my expectations are, but agree on that.
Absolutely.
So that they're, arriving punctually to class, having cameras on during active learning, and contributing to conversation to maximise their active learning as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I want to ask you each is to tell me about a time or an aspect of your curriculum design or delivery that you have adapted based on your experiences. So you tried something and you were like, wow, this worked in my head. This totally didn't work in reality. I need to fix this. And I want one short story from each of you. So whoever goes first can pick the best one about leeches or turtles or whatever's going to come up next.
I'll go one here, Kate. This is last year's online learning experiences and utilising mobile technology to be able to effectively try and engage students. And sitting in front of a screen like we're all doing consistently over Zoom at the moment does wear you down. Especially, I know the three of us love being out of doors.
Yeah.
And when a day begins at 8 and maybe finishes at 8, and you look at the watch, it's a bit like a casino. You don't realise what time of day it is, and you haven't done anything other than sit in the Zoom sessions.
Yep.
So that out in the field with students, running some of our classes, that made me think a little bit more about how can we use the tool of a mobile phone and running a Zoom class. And I know the boys, we all got to try and do different ways of doing this in our classes, but I ended up putting the thing on the end of a painter's pole, a 3-metre aluminium painter's pole, and that was my teaching prop in a set of Bluetooth earphones, and was able to talk to the student class and take them with me on the end of this 3-metre pole. It may have been up a cliff face just down here in Anglesey, and that risk and perceived risk and everything that came with that, they were immersed in the moment with you. To foolishly walk midwinter into the ocean fully dressed with the phone and still talking to the students and then disappearing under the water, that got them hooked. And to take them on a mountain bike or on a 4-wheel drive in a car. Now, it was a matter of continually adapting those ideas and refining it to the pool of students you had in your classroom.
Absolutely.
To keep them on the edge of the seat. They were in lockdown, in hard lockdown in Melbourne, and it was great to be able to, in that case, take them virtually out of the locked up space into an open space. And having that mindset is probably what I try and take with me in a lot of the things that I try and do, is to continually try and adapt and evolve ideas, not just sit there and go, well, okay, I've been doing this for 20 years, it must be good, but what's the next latest and greatest thing? How can we use it, be it drone technology that I know that some of my colleagues question.
Easy, I can't wait till you get a drone again.
I feel like that's a story for a different time. I think that's a really interesting story though, because I think a lot of people, when they think of outdoor education, they think it would be very hands-off technology, like going back to grassroots, trying to disengage from that technological world. But to actually demonstrate how you can bridge those two ideas together, I think is a really creative outcome, and I'm sure your students were very grateful for it. And I'm starting to understand why your students might have been a little bit bored in my Zoom classroom. That didn't involve me faking my death in the ocean. But now I know the standard we're going for. I think we can all grow and adapt. But I love that, and I think that notion of continuing to push yourself and push those boundaries and not be afraid to try something new is something that everyone can adopt in some sense, even if the extent is not quite that amazing. Craig, you were going to add something there?
Oh, look, I like the idea that we go and we demonstrate how to back yourself. And sometimes that's trying new technology. And sometimes that's just trying the equipment. Definitely there are times that we want to make sure that things are well rehearsed and that we do things. But it's that sense of wonder, like, if we do this, what's going to happen? Can I do this? And to demonstrate that wonder and hopefully that becomes the contagious thing that we take away, I think is really important. I was running a bit of AVI training. I was in Japan with some people, and the snow conditions were perfect I was hoping to just put a little crack in the snow, so I had the students standing on a ridge line, and I came down and I wanted to do this big, powerful turn. And my hope was that there would just be a crack that formed in the snow.
Yeah.
But as I came down and I put in a big, powerful turn, the whole bottom of the hillside slid away underneath me.
Oh my gosh.
There's a big avalanche that just went down into the valley. And so that was an awesome demonstration. But at the same time, I didn't feel like we should be sticking around to have a look. I had enough momentum to come back up onto the top of the ridge where the students could observe, and figured the observation was made and that we would just get out of there. But it comes to that same spirit of thing that Busey was talking about. It doesn't matter if it's a phone or a ski or a kayak or a climbing route. To back ourselves enough to demonstrate the fact that we are continually students and learning, and that, what happens if, or can we see this? Can we actually observe this in nature or with each other or in this space? And I love that opportunity. And look, there, I don't want to incriminate myself any more than that. Like, luckily you're asking for one. It's kind of like sitting around with friends and we start sharing bad parent stories where we've nearly lost our kids at sea and things like that. So I'll stop there.
No, I totally understand that, and it's crazy how if it turns out positively, it's a great learning experience. If it turns out negatively, all of a sudden it's a lawsuit. So it's fine. Again, it's about finding that balance. I love how you talk about having this sense of wonder. It's interesting because as I listen to you, I actually think of it more as a sense of courage that I think a lot of educators sometimes lose in the classroom, because we're so focused on wanting to do a good job that I think sometimes it's easy to fall into old habits. And like Steve was saying before, you do what's safe because you know it works, even if there might be a better outcome out there. And so I think one of the big take-home messages I'm hearing from you guys is to have the courage to try something new and to explore something new. And if it doesn't work, then that's okay. You adapt and you do something different next time.
Just to kind of start, one thing I look at is continuous improvement, and I use the SET and SEU data to help with that, to inform where I'm going to take my pedagogy. Last year, we had COVID and lockdowns,
Yeah.
which prevented us from being able to run field trips. And across the 5 outdoor units that we collectively teach, there was only one, which is Introduction to Adventure Environments, that we could facilitate through remote learning effectively during the block. So that required a rewrite of some of our assessment tasks to be able to make that fit, as well as looking at how we run practical learning activities and experiential learning activities remotely. So the thing that I found was an outdoor backyard camp out idea.
Oh, cool.
Through Outdoors Queensland. So that was proposed to the rest of the group, and we developed that into an assignment, along with another activity where we were initially looking at using documentaries, films to get the students to consider what it would be like to go on a larger expedition. When I was in one of the professional development and community engagement seminars that I was participating in, I met a lady called Sandy Robson. So Sandy, Steve had looked at as a potential for this documentary activity, but meeting her in person, I started networking with her, and I asked if she'd be interested in coming to teach a workshop with the students to talk about her expedition, where she kayaked from, I think it was Berlin, down the Danube through the Mediterranean.
Wow.
Around India, through Bangladesh, into Malaysia and into Burma, down through Indonesia to, I think it was one of the islands in the Torres Strait.
Wow.
Recreating a journey of a German kayaker in the 1930s called Oscar Speck. So Sandy said that she'd be interested in coming to talk to us, and she facilitated the first workshop. So we adapted the assessment tasks to be an activity called Meet the Adventurer. Outside of that, we got other high-profile adventurers from around Australia, and Craig was able to get Simon Metz, who's a fairly well-known climber in Victoria, and Tim can't his name. So Tim was the first Australian to climb Mount Everest back in 1984.
Wow.
So yeah, it turned into a really engaging and interesting series of people that we had coming in to this class. I guess amongst the three of us, we were always looking forward to that each month, with all of us kind of attending these meetings, even if we weren't teaching the unit, just so we could listen to the adventurers speak.
Yeah.
So that was done in regards to, I guess, needing to adapt to meet the remote learning situation that we're in last year, and how it could continually engage the students.
No, that sounds amazing, and it's almost like it's like a little reward for you guys too. It's like meeting your heroes, just as you're introducing heroes to the students as well. So it's nice that you're able to learn from that as well as experience it with the students.
It's amazing. That was really, you're right, Kate. It was really nice to have those people show up and share their experience. And Tim McCartney-Snipe was particularly candid about his beginnings. He's seen as kind of like one of the greatest, one of those great mountaineers, but he was really happy to talk about his humble beginnings at Timbertop and take us through the process. And it really spoke to our students, not necessarily being totally, I mean, they probably weren't aware of the magnitude of this guy's, stardom in the outdoor world, but his approach was very welcoming and made it seem completely possible for any one of our students to start getting out there and then find their way to Everest, apart from, the harrowing experiences of his first, expedition up in the Karakoram or wherever he was. But look, I think that was really a nice save. We were really wondering about where we were going to go with that, and to get the three of us together before lockdown and watch that unit evolve. Aaron was convening that unit last year, and watch that unit evolve over the year was really quite good, and it's left us in a better place this year. So we've taken a lot of our learnings from that COVID experience, and a lot of that delivery now has been influenced by some of the things that we learned last year. So that was really quite good.
Yeah, amazing. And how fortunate to have someone who is so high profile able to inspire your students and make them feel like they can achieve it just by sharing their story.
Yeah, look, the beauty of it too, these people normally charge thousands of dollars per hour for a delivery, and they willingness of them to give of their time for the benefit of the students, and also for them to try, in some cases, something totally new they've never done before, created another element or bow of another string to their bow that allowed another means of income for them over COVID. So it really was, in some ways, a two-way street. But it was just awesome that they basically gave up their time to just talk to the so-called little people, the students and us. We put these people up on pedestals, but really they were so happy to come down, and they are just an everyday person when it all boils down. So it was great.
That sounds like such an amazing initiative and experience. Probably, and like you said, it was probably two-way in that, well, you guys found it wonderful. It was probably enriching for them as well to be able to share those experiences with the next generation of adventurers. I think that just about wraps us up. It's very clear that the take-home message from this podcast is not to be afraid and to be willing to push yourselves past those limits, to try something new, to be courageous in your curriculum design, to stretch the boundaries of what you think is possible, knowing that worst case scenario, if it doesn't work, you can go back to the drawing board and try again. Aaron, Steve, and Craig, I would like to thank you once again for coming along to this podcast. It was a pleasure getting to talk to you, and I, like I said, am now questioning my entire career pathway. That being said, I have never been camping before, so I probably am not ready to launch into your careers just yet. Thank you so much for coming along. Really appreciate your time.